Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to our session on cloud native attacks, diving into the depth. I invite Mr. Anil Nama, who's CEO of Cloud Forces Services, to be on the stage. Please give him a hand. Mr. Anil Nama has 32 years in the industry and he's currently CIO of Cloud Forces Services. I invite upon Mr. Deepak Munjal. He is in the industry for 15 years. He's working as InfoSec security consultant at NCR Corporation. Now our moderator, Mr. Anuj Tiwari, he's in the industry for 23 years. He's a CISO of TMF Group. Mr. Rahul Arora, he's in the industry for 18 years, as working as a regional sales manager right now at CrowdStrike. And Mr. Simarpreet Singh, regional sales director India and SARC at Cystic. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Teja. Good morning, everyone. Possibly the first session of the day. I hope you can hear us fine. All right, fabulous. So, delighted to be here in front of all of you with our esteemed panelists. Essentially, as we see, the word has been evolving ever since COVID started, right? And you must have been hearing this term a lot, that a lot has really changed. But what I can tell you is, when I talk to my industry peers and colleagues, what we really see is a very rapid adoption of cloud services and people working from anywhere in today's world. Yeah. So what's really moved is, I remember us working and thinking of technology stacks and security stacks in terms of everything coming out in depth. Yeah. So we thought of concepts like defense in depth, wherein we had a lot of layers of protection early on. And then we evolved towards working from anywhere. So all the perimeters dissolved. Identity started to become a little more in limelight and started to become a little more of a perimeter in the new world. And then what we started seeing was a little more true cloud native adoption, which is the theme of today's conversation. Yeah, so what we want to talk about today is what and how we have seen technology, both the problems and the solutions thereof from the experts today, of how they have started, what are the new trends we are seeing, and what are we doing to deal with them. Yeah, so this is really a hands-on industry view, plus with a little bit of our service providers and OEMs to talk about what is happening in terms of solving. So what are the leading edge thoughts? How is technology shaping? And how can they help some of us, even me being a defender, on a day-to-day basis? Yeah? So with that, I'll probably pivot on to Deepak to understand what are you seeing in the industry today as a defender, as a person who's trying to keep your organization secure, and coming from NCR again, you deal with a lot of financial supply chain. So what has changed for you? What has changed from a cloud native standpoint, and what are you seeing?
Okay. Am I audible? Okay. So I think since we are coming from NCR Corporation, where we are ATM manufacturer along with the ATM services, so like every organization, we are moving to cloud, having the cloud enablement teams who come across certain cloud issues and cloud attacks on a daily basis, I would say. So with movement to cloud, the provision of VMs, your container have become very easy. So now you have the VMs container available on real-time basis, but they also come with their own challenges and issues. So some of the issues I think we are seeing on the first is the misconfiguration, like someone has created the VMs and containers and have the RDP ports, SSH port open, and some crypto miner have started using the crypto mining. I think one article I was reading about the crypto mining business, even though just trying to divert a little bit. So now the crypto mining attacks will increase because the money, the return they are getting, having their own setup, they will not going to get the same amount because of the Bitcoin prices are going down. So now they want to use the open VMs to mine their crypto minings and all other bad stuff. And another issue we are facing on the default password being set up on the GitHubs, where you have service account, you have open API keys with their default, the password will not change, and another area we are seeing on the identity and authentication part. So this happened because of the security by design is not implemented. You have the process in place like ArcSpec review, where you have architecture review board comes and provide their opinion on whether to host this application or not, whether we have covered all the attack surface or not, have we protected, apply the implemented the adequate controls, data at rest, data in transit, who is holding the keys, on all those stuff. So those when this process is not taken place, the application get hosted in the cloud as the issues open. There are several issues open, and it become very easy for attacker to attack and use, and of course impacting the CIA triad. So those are some of the issues. There are others. Even we have DDoS issues, and you have the shadow IT, because as I mentioned that with the VMs are now available, you can have the ability to provision those servers immediately on the cloud. So shadow IT become another issues, even though we are trying to build a solution. And not last, but no, so another major concern we are seeing on the container side, that's another issues. So container, we are able to scan the images before the CI/CD pipeline, but on the runtime basis, I think this is again posing another issue in terms of EDR. I'm not sure if there are solutions available which can perform the container scan on real-time basis. So those are some of the challenges on the industry we are seeing on daily basis. That's my some thoughts around the issues we are facing.
Thank you, Deepak. So we heard a lot about, from a technology standpoint, how misconfigurations are happening from the beginning. He talked about the architecture review board. I think this all again goes back to the concept of very rapid adoption, right? Everything is moving towards the cloud. The workloads are progressing very well, and then absolutely, when something happens at a certain pace, there would be problems which will catch up with them as well. And at that juncture, I would probably rope in our expert Simmerpreet. Yeah, so Simmerpreet, we heard about misconfigurations, we heard about rapid adoption. What do you see from a service provider standpoint, and how the industry is dealing with it?
So first of all, thanks Deepak for putting that perspective, and I would say you actually summed up everything. What our customer sees nowadays, you actually brought everything on the same level ground. Let me start with a very small narrative over here. We all have heard a story of a boy who cried wolf, right? He will go every time and say wolf has come and he's attacking, but wolf won't be there. And that's what we are seeing in our environment. We have alert fatigueness, we have alerts coming in, but we don't know what to prioritize. And like Deepak said, you have hybrid environment, you have Google, you have AWS, Azure, your own data centers. So how do you manage the entire risk visibility across your organization? That becomes a very key critical aspect of the entire thing. And as a solution provider, it becomes our responsibility to prioritize those vulnerabilities for you which are there in your environment, to let you know, like Deepak said, to help you manage your configurations, manage your accesses across the organization, across your hybrid infrastructure. So can we provide you a single pane of glass, a smoke screen which can tell you what is happening, a single risk profile across your organization? I think that becomes very critical as a solution provider for us to enable our customers.
Fabulous. Thanks, Umarpreet. So all about the alert fatigueness, the single pane, and ease of the problems that we are seeing on the ground, and how you guys can bring in the simplicity in it. That's wonderful. With that, I'll probably pivot again to an industry expert. We have Anil with us today, and we heard somebody who's in a financial supply chain, manufacturers of ATMs, versus somebody who is running cloud services. So Anil from Cloud4C, Anil, I would love to hear from you what you guys are seeing from customers. What has really changed as a cloud service provider in the recent years, and how does cloud native fit into all of that picture?
Okay, so as spoken by Deepak, it's a lot hazy out there, and as spoken by Simran, we are also finding our customers wavering between left and right, which essentially means, People adopted during COVID. Let's start with the O365 and Teams, MS Teams, every one of us use. So a little bit of everybody is there on the cloud. And then you started this plethora of movement of the IASS piece on the cloud. So Azure came in with all the infra. There was already EC2 and all of AWS, and customers started to say that, okay, fine, in COVID I can't go to my DC, put me in the cloud, at least I can access my infra and I can manage it. That was the primary reason. Now, as we come out of this COVID, we are now seeing a totally confused world. Let's talk of a typical bank. So initially banking said, okay, fine, my mobility and maybe my loan management systems, let them move on to the cloud. I'll keep my core banking, branch banking and the GRC, the risk and compliance on-prem. Few of the banks said, no, I want to do this totally to cloud. Few of the banks have come back this year saying, oh, fine, the Red Hat stack, the SUSE Rancher stack have improved. Let me bring it back and can I have it on-prem? Let's talk about our manufacturing and retail, the sort of customers which use ERPs like SAP and all. So initially it was log, block and barrel, please put my SAP onto cloud. Then came in Mr. Rice, SAP Rice. Then came in few of the other providers who built in this stack around this, in and around GST and all those other peripheral. Now these customers also, some are in cloud, some part is still running on-prem. So from a service provider angle, this is the world that we straddle with. When you talk about on-prem, the defense in depth, the old timers, one device, one role speaks, they have their routers, firewall, IPS, IDS, WAF. Now sooner we move to the Kubernetes containers, the world out there is totally different. And the primary reason is people want to have the same look and feel experience of the on-prem onto the cloud. When we look at the cloud from a transactional angle, you have a API gateway, you have some container running there, Kubernetes. Now Mr. Kubernetes doesn't have a persistent storage, which means if a Kubernetes dies and I roll it off, I got nothing to know which Kubernetes guy, which end user, which transaction actually transpired, because that's not the property of it. So which means you have to build intelligence on top of it. Sooner you start to build intelligence on top of it, it will delay your transactions on mobility platform. The second challenge which is coming in is people are becoming more and more web and mobile savvy. So each application is now becoming that. And it is back to our old mainframe days. So if you take mobile app as a console of a mini frame, that app talks directly to the API gateway. There is no way we could come in between or do something. If we try to come in between and put in those layers, then suddenly there is a new issue of latency or the scalability goes for a toss. Add to that the third problem of DevSecOps. So initially, if you see on-prem software, we had releases planned maybe a year in advance. So 90% of the time was around SIT, UAT, testing. Now this 90% has been broken down, all that 90% has gone and they expect 2 releases a week, features not promised. Now suppose some misconfiguration is there from a service provider angle, right? And they are talking about collaborative security, which means you are taking from the platform security. Somebody has misconfigured on top. To let us share reverse, share the usernames, or maybe have that object storage, the latest whatever Tata Macro came yesterday, day before yesterday. Those are all small misconfigurations which in our normal routine testing on-prem or the old SDLC cycle, we could easily detect. Now that all those problems have become runtime. Combine that with all the web threats, because now every enterprise application is becoming web savvy. Add to that all the web threats and you can understand the pressures on us as a service provider to serve. So that's our perspective, sir, from a service provider.
No, thank you. And I think that was very, very rich perspective on what again we are seeing from log, stock and barrel to defense in depth to now everything moving cloud native. And I think as we heard Deepak also talk about crypto mining and crypto jacking and essentially jacking up the bills and hurting somebody financially. With that, I think what's really becoming important is as we are trying to retrofit our cybersecurity landscape, and we are thinking how do you defend better, how do you first identify and then eventually protect, and God forbid, with help of some friends around the industry, respond better, right? With all of that traction, how do you reduce that time frame to what your response rate was? And with that, I think very important aspect is first understanding and identifying your enemy, or who's trying to hurt you, what are the vectors they're trying to now hurt you on, are the old vectors even relevant? So how do you kind of think of that? And with that, I can really think of pulling in Rahul here as an industry expert, who can possibly talk about what the adversary view is and how is it evolving, and what is his suggestion for industries and CISOs to be better defenders. Rahul, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Tiwari, and thanks everyone on the panel. Pleasure to be on this learned panel today. But I think just before we go to the adversary, it's so interesting that I think everybody who spoke brought up so much relevance in today's scenario, right? We heard about supply chain. We did hear about alert fatigueness, right? We of course heard about theft, that is credential theft, identities, right? So if you just realize that while we moved and the world moved to this digitization as such, or adopting cloud and on this journey, right? Everybody started talking about solutions and tools and technologies, right? And there was a point, while misconfiguration, of course, is a bigger challenge, we started talking about posture management. Then, of course, workload, runtime, CI/CD pipeline, and we started talking about CWP, cloud workload protection. Now a new terminology, CNAP, right? So many, so and so forth, right? But I think very well pointed, Anuj, that knowing the enemy is also an important aspect. And I think that's exactly what CrowdStrike as a solution provider also brings on the table, because since the time of inception, that's one thing that we have believed in, is that there is always a human adversary behind any kind of attack on any attack surface, be it on-prem or cloud, doesn't matter, right? So just, from Mr. Nama, your point of view, our recent global threat report highlighted categorically this piece of CSP abuse, cloud security provider abuse, right? Wherein, of course, we are talking about the adversaries taking or leveraging the CSP partner relationship to gain access into additional targets and moving laterally, right? Now that's a very critical point. And while we know that this is happening, it is even important to know that a Russian origin adversary has been doing it consistently using this technique for last 2 years. So having that knowledge, I think that threat intelligence, right, brings a lot of value. And with that, I would also like to just touch upon as a last comment that I think Simarpreet also mentioned, simplifying the solutions to address these requirements and challenges in the industry is very important. And that's where I think it becomes very important that a unified solution can address your problems and requirements of posture management, to workload protection, to runtime, to container, and also giving and delivering that threat intel with the hunting capabilities. So I think that's my view on that, Anuj, and very valid point brought in, of knowing the enemy. I think that's half the battle won. So yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Rahul, if you would like to add, please.
Yeah, so certainly I can add something on the CSPM. I think these are the terms provided by Gartner, but regardless, the expectation from these tools should be like, they should be able to perform the continuous assessments, secure the cloud workload, and defend, of course. So some of the expectation are, they provide some sort of scoring. They have their own way of scoring. There are multiple tools available. Of course, we are not going to discuss on the tools here, but the expectation are they should provide the real-time assessments, score them, and so that those score can be used to improve your security, cloud security posture especially. So when we were trying to onboard these tools, I think 2 years back, so the questions we have in our mind, because the hybrid cloud or the multi-cloud is the way to go. So whether or not these tools have the ability to bring the configurations around the multi-cloud. Some tools have the ability to even bring the configuration from the on-premise system. So you have the single pane of glass to view all your issues, recommendations coming from them, and how to resolve the issues. so one CSPM are doing better than other, depending on whether you are heavy on the containerized application. One CSPM may not work for you. So before you onboard those CSPM, just because the trend is going on and everyone is recommending, you have to understand where your applications are, whether you are heavy on VMs, heavy on container, whether or maybe some organization are using only single cloud. Maybe you don't require CSPM at all because your Azure, the CSP portals provide you the all the necessity requirements. So doing the analytics, those are very expensive tool. Make sure you perform your due diligence, have your requirement documented, and see which CSPM have the ability to resolve your cloud security issues.
That's very interesting. If I would love to pull in Simmerby, there's this point of time. I heard things like cloud security providers. I heard multiple hybrid environments. I heard the need of multiple CSPMs. And that, as a practitioner, I think we all get eluded by the fact that there are just so many tools out there. There are just so many tools which we are not clear. He talked about certain tools delivering certain capabilities. So what are the technology advancements and what are the solutions that are coming in that can potentially take away some of these problems? Comment,
Sure. So what Deepak said is very right. There's no silver bullet to anything. Every customer is unique. You guys have invested a lot in your infrastructures. With COVID, you have made changes. I have worked with like largest of the public sector banks, where I never thought they will move to cloud because RBI doesn't let them do that. But they have taken those stands, they have taken those risks, and they have moved on. So yeah, there's no silver bullet. And what Anuj said, know your enemy. I would say we need to go a step ahead. We know our enemy, and we know whether how dangerous is that enemy. So in your context, let's say you know what vulnerabilities are there, whether these vulnerabilities are exploitable or not. That's very important. We might be fixing a not so critical vulnerability, but the thing which is more critical is hurting us. And can I do it at every stage of your life cycle, whether it's the source or the build? Can I do it end to end? That's the most critical thing right now.
Fabulous, very interesting. With that, I almost don't feel like commenting on this one. If I can bring you in, Anil, again, we heard about some of the largest banks dealing with some of these challenges. We heard about small organizations facing these challenges. How do you think customers are looking at cloud technologies and their adoption of from a service provider standpoint, and especially probably a little more from an Indian context, if you will? I know you guys are present in more than 22 countries and everything, but you're pretty spread wide. But how is that Indian industries kind of leading, or are we following, or what are the trends you're seeing? Would love to hear that from you.
Okay, so let me first put in what we as a service provider have to do. See, if we look at the Kubernetes kube controller somehow is better than our AISS or the monitoring tool, because when a Kubernetes container goes down, it's able to bring it up. So what we did was we thought long time of what to do. Do we put in direct tools, somebody that can give us intelligence like a EDR on a desktop? So we ended up with a simple value proposition. We said there is something known as ELK, big data analytics going on. So let us as sysadmins also try that. So we put a ELK stack there. We dumped all the logs. So we dump Prometheus log, which is essentially your database query, etc. We dump in whatever is the monitoring log there. We dump in the app logs there, all in log format, raw format. And this is like a big data store. You can call it as a Elasticsearch, big data, whatever you want. Essentially, it's a very large log store. Sometimes the size of this store is more than the business data that is out there. So if this guy is like 50 TB, we are talking about 5 to 10 TB of actual business data. That's a add-on investment that we have to do to make anything or everything secure. The developments that have happened when you look at from a SysDig angle or from a CrowdStrike angle is they have brought in this very fast processing on top of these data stores. Because of by virtue of Hadoops and big data, whatever has happened, we no longer depend on that SQL query and table loading and all. They are able to bring it up and show the intelligence. That's the common trend which is happening. In AWS and all, we call it as CloudTrail. Azure, you may call it as Monitor. Here, you can call it as Elk-Stack. So we are essentially dumping everything, and we are trying to show a single scope. Now, where we are failing presently is when in Indian startup we move towards more and more open source. So long as it is a Red Hat, SUSE Rancher, AWS, AKS environment, we have this platform protection, or we have somebody is looking after those builds to put in some curves, bring out patches, etc., some guidelines. As we move towards the total open source, then suddenly we find that even these logs that we are collecting, they are deficient in knowledge, because there is no tried and tested way. The second is we are also seeing, like he said, in the DevOps chain, the CI/CD pipeline, there are leaks around GitHub wherever they are putting source code. There are leaks around wherever they are sharing information like an object storage, right? Now those leaks, because they are not very well defined, the OpenStack per se or its deployments, that's where is one of our challenges. The second challenges which is coming in is in terms of the rapid deployment of applications. Now when you take any startup, it may start with 1 or 2 features. Within a course of a quarter, they may end up with 100 more releases, and they may end up with 50 features. So the whole the risk posture of the application, which was like a storefront of a particular context, rapidly multiplies in that first year of growth. And that is the second challenge that we see. So while you may like to know the adversary or contextually on the initial phases of a startup, the way they develop over 3 to 6 months, as they start to put in more and more richer features, the context starts to change. And therefore our earlier intelligence of trending does not help us or does not lead us as a service provider to help our ecosystems in India to have the later on context, because a lot more functionalities, a lot more calls, many things have happened by that time. And that's the chief thing. The third thing about the Indian startup is they're all very tech savvy. So one thing that we don't face in Indian startups is availability. They know how to code, they know how to run, as compared to other startups of whichever country you want to compare. The applications which are built by the Indian startup ecosystem are much more sturdier. Don't get those many availability calls. Maybe it's by virtue because India has been a development or developing base of engineers, but that's the key difference that you find. So yes, our startup ecosystems lack security, which I don't totally blame them, because the market dictates after an entrepreneur idea of what are the additional features, right? And this rapid changing in context changes their whole enterprise risk posture, and that is a gap. So as rightly pointed out by him, what we require is somewhere some dynamic thing which, like him, puts up some spoke screen, and as this context changes in near time or near real time, we are able to support. Just remember, our IRTs are like our ITILs, half an hour TAT, 4-hour response or resolution. That doesn't work here. And the earlier VA patching report closure in a quarter with the next application release doesn't apply here, because by that time that application would have gone 20 version changes. So that's the key context that we are facing now.
So I guess what we are continuing to hear is on the cloud, it's no man's land. Right? You just end up exploring, and it's like you're trying to explore a new country. You figure out you missed 5 security controls, and hopefully not via the media. But amidst all of these things, Rahul, if I may bring you in again one more time, you're thinking from now that everything is evolved to a borderless. Can you maybe add a little more color around how identity is being compromised, or how XDRs are playing a solution in this? Or if you really think about we heard a lot about the stacks, the problem with analyzing all the data, everything. How do you folks deal with some of these complexities, and what are the solutions you guys are bringing in here?
Thanks. I think that's exactly where we would like to bring into attention that identity. right? And credential theft. All of us would have seen fake authentication pages or websites, right? Actually taking us to somewhere else, unintended or intended, right? Now that's exactly just one of the real world examples while we talk about identity theft. We are talking about stealing the credentials, right? And you're right that it's absolutely prominent, and it's happening now, right? All of us have mobile phones, smartphones, on an average about 30 to 31 applications active on our mobile phone right now, right? Forget PI data, we can't even name what data is going out, right? So from that point of view, identity protection becomes very important. Delivering right security solutions around that becomes very important, right? And that does not only belong or pertain to, for example, securing your active directories, but also taking it forward to your cloud directory stores, right? Whether it is Azure or whatever, right? I think that's an important piece. One, identity protection. Second, ensuring a robust MFA. While we, of course, understand and we have adopted a lot of MFA technologies, right? But what's working right, what's not, I think we don't need to name, but then a recent MFA, an incident we all are aware about, right? So having that MFA policies in place, authenticating that MFA and integrating that with an identity protection is equally important. Okay, that's my point of view. Second is, let's not forget or segregate identity only on premise, only on Active Directory. Let's ensure that we are looking at identities across the attack surface. So that's my 2 point. Just to add on that, while we're talking about identities and the exposure and the data, right? CrowdStrike is the largest security cloud in the world with about 1 trillion events or hits getting a day. To draw some reference, Twitter gets 1 trillion hits in a month. Okay. Now that's the kind of data that we bring in to use and develop and to robust our ML to deliver identity security as well as cloud security end to end. And then adding one more angle to it, while we are talking about identity protection as a service, we're talking about cloud security, we are talking about all those terminologies that the panelists spoke about. I think one more angle is the people angle, wherein I'm not sure how many of us would agree, but then we definitely find shortage in skilled people in managing and maintaining all these solutions. And that's where simplification comes into picture, right? And that's where also another thing which is coming into picture and which is picking up pace is we all know how managed services, and so in your environment as well, cloud services, managed services are also taking a very bright shape, right? Wherein the people can actually help customers like you and others working for them end to end, delivering the right security solution, giving you peaceful nights. So that's another service that CrowdStrike can bring on the table, covering identity, cloud, and the other EDR aspect as well, and managing it for you 24/7. So that's my view on identity and cloud security, sir.
Fabulous, fabulous. No, thanks for that, Rahul. And towards the end, if I may bring in, Deepak one more time. Deepak, any other? We heard about the identity aspect, right? You talked a lot about the workload protection. You talked a lot about how things are retrofitting from a cybersecurity control standpoint. But what are the challenges and what are you guys doing around identity? If I may request you to comment.
Yeah, I think on the identity part, the hybrid model where you have the directory services on-prem and your SSO configurations and the authentication happen on-prem. So there are multiple ways it happens. One is hash synchronization, pass-through authentication, or the federated one. So not all that. So one issue we are facing, not whenever we acquire some application or want to take the services from application, they don't support federation. So they have their own local authentication where you have to again remember the password, user ID. I think so. The application provider, I would say, has to be more congruent about the providing the federated services. Maybe it's Okta or your Azure Active Directory, the synchronization. I think that's the whole thing. I think they should move out and just provide the SSO. I think that's the only way, because I think in the sometime when I personally sit in the ARB board, I really don't like the application who don't provide the SSO. So they say, hey, it's a rollback. we can't move forward. I mean, we can move forward just low risk. I mean, since we have to support the business. I think in the next 2 or 3 years, we will say, don't take this application. We are not going to go onward until they don't support the federated authentication. So I think the application, if someone is listening from the application provider, make sure that you provide the federation.
Fabulous, thank you. With that, possibly I want to take a quick pause here and probably switch to the audience and see if there are questions. And I already see a hand going up in two actually. So, is there somebody to support with the mic?
So you're talking that we can't take the application which doesn't support such type of identity things. But what about the in-house development applications? That is also one of the gray area where we are facing a lot of challenges with respect to all this security things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think with the legacy application, we certainly see either if business has dependency, maybe you can continue it, or I mean, if it is not publicly exposed, maybe have the lesser risk because it's an on-prem. But when it comes to cloud SaaS application, it's a must go because it's a new platform, right? For legacy application, you can't do anything. You have to just go with it until those applications get retired. Nothing can be done about those applications.
And if I may add, see, especially from a legacy application standpoint, it also depends upon how you're retrofitting your cyber controls. For example, if let's say hopefully it's not exposed directly to the internet. And if there is a way to bring in MFA, or if there's a way to integrate it with some sort of federated entity, that's always better because that takes sort of one layer away from the stack being in the legacy application itself. But then there are predominant challenges around some of these. Of course, how you can segregate from a network standpoint, from a VLAN, some sort of SDN. I think some of these things are helping, but your challenge is absolutely acknowledged. You see the same things happening with legacy apps, and eventually that's where and Anand wants to add as well. Yeah, so I'll just sum up by saying that I think that's where cloud native apps is the next bit, right? Because no matter how much we retrofit, let's try and understand there will be always challenges around because they were never designed for it. And then you're trying to not design something right and it's a bolt-on. There would always be a nail like in the wall that that will always be visible. So there is no clear-cut solution out there.
So yeah, I can take up a case study around this. Where let's analyze anybody. I mean, one of the largest fertilizer company, let's take, recently moved on to Oracle Cloud. They had all D2K as their 120, 130 of those legacy applications monolithic, which were developed at one time in D2K Oracle. What they ended up doing was they put in the front end of the latest cloud native. They retained those particular databases because DB as a service more or less is similar, whether you are Postgre or, I mean, it's very minor change which happens. So one is the middleware or the business logic layer you could change. The second interesting point we saw in one of the very large manufacturers which had this IP. They use Yokogawa, SCADA and all those things have a difference and they don't want to change it. So there were two particular challenges there. One was from their industrial console that they had made, analog console and all. Still it is relevant, but they wanted it to be converted to IoT. So we put in cameras, we put in robots, and we capture that information into whatever you say, speech to text or photo to text, and we populate their analytics. That's one way to do it. The second, of course, and we have been promoting this especially in Indian startup, do not look at an on-prem model. Look at a totally SaaS environment. Everybody is MFA. Now, those legacy application users, now you could give access or control them through your network access points instead of within the application. So let's say theoretically there is an additional firewall put in front, an SD-WAN device, and I have got a total SaaS environment. So only those users could land up on that firewall. So there are controls in front which help you adopt these legacy. Yes, of course, you have to sunset them. But till such time, you could use the latest developments on the end user side to control the access to it.
May I have one question? Yeah, my name is Tara Dutt. I have a question to Deepak and Anuj. As we more talking about cloud native, right? And more discussion around the cloud server and VM, right? the biggest missing piece is cloud native. Cloud native is not just a server, as Anuj also said. My more question to you is, we're more talking about identities, right? There are three parts of it when we talk about identity. The second and most important part from cloud native standpoint is an authorization, not the identity, right? When we talk about authorization, typically in a monolithic app, it is fine to define, as you said, AD and other stuff. When we talk about in microservices, new digital age application where authorizations are built to a service level, not on the first part of the, how you see and what are the typical challenges you see typically from an authorization part on the microservices side? If you may know, there are open source projects from CNCF which is graduated now, that's called OPA, Open Policy Agent. Do you see anything that kind of stuff is being used, the application which you guys are building?
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about this. See, if you look at the architecture of a Azure Amazon, we have always got something which is known as shared secrets. If you want to talk in the current term, it's all about tokenization which authorizes it. For example, if you talk about your or mine debit card or card, the card is issued by Visa. We hold in SBI or a PNB bank, which essentially means all the secrets to use that card belongs to the Visa. So authorization comes from Visa. Similar is the concept of the shared secrets. So what happens if you have a cloud native application which can take encryption keys as an authorization code, it is pretty easy to govern, because based on the authorization you will issue a symmetric asymmetric key for the transaction, and it's a very well established protocol since 2004 known as Kerberos, works on port number 88, right? So long as the application understands it, it is easy to extend it to a shared secret framework. You may use HSM like the banks, or you may use a Terraform shared secret, or you can use a AWS, whatever you want. But if the application is not developed with those libraries, then we are really in a challenge. Then the authorization also has to include the identity or SID, the security token, which has to carry, like Windows within itself, is the allowed access, not allowed access. And then it can be totally impersonated. So if you want to differentiate authorization to the other permissions, then this authorization piece can only come from the knowledge of encryption domain. Think of it differently. Let's say we have an encryption domain. For example, a Visa card. Once we blacklist it, we can never use it. Are we ready that if we lose our administrator password, we'll let go of last 20 years of data? If we are ready, we can deploy encryption in every backup. Each of these storage comes equipped with it. But you lose it, you lose total. There is no recovery. And because we do not have that risk appetite, or the adversaries knows we do not have the risk appetite, and hence and therefore all the admin passwords of this world. But is there a solution? Are all systems right from infra to application layer capable? Answer is yes. Has it been used widely? Yes, at least in the financial domains. Can it be easily adopted? All your operating systems, all your Kerberos platforms, all your hardwares, everybody allows that. The question is, can we deploy it?
Thanks, Anand. That's a very interesting point. I know we are almost over time, so we have one last question.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Nikhil. I have two questions, just to summarize on that part. So the first question is, with cloud service aggregators like a CASB, right? How, according to you or with your experience, they are aiding in reducing the attack on cloud platforms? That's number one question. And number two is, with with so many organizations going on cloud or adopting cloud, how, according to you, or what, as per your experience, is the RNR, the roles and responsibility matrix, is helping in reducing the attack surface? So if you could just help understand.
You want to take that? Should I take that? Okay, all right. So from a CASB standpoint, I'll quickly try to address that. Look, especially with the adoption of cloud that I talked about, there has been a lot of shadow IT, if you will, because everybody is using their personal devices. The corporate assets, workloads on the cloud are increasing. So the CASB at least is bringing you that visibility which was lacking in the traditional solutions. That's one area which it has advanced really well in. Second is again trying to tell you where your attack surface is and how do you kind of monitor it, because there is limited stuff you can see. Security always was inside out monitoring, if you think again from a defense in depth standpoint, but this really is looking at an external in view, because that's the adversary view. So if somebody is trying to breach you, that's the view they are getting. So that gap kind of existed in the past, which I think some of these things are helping. Have they helped reduce the threats? Absolutely yes. Is this the silver bullet? And so it, see, garbage in, garbage out. So if you feed your CASP well, if it knows where the assets are, it can give you good possibilities. But if it's not looking at outside assets, then possibly we are still not looking at the right attack surface. And your second question was
Roles and responsibilities.
roles and responsibilities. So identity, is something that is being called as a cliche, right, as a new perimeter. So is it becoming more important? I think it's becoming important every day. If you look at most of these solutions, the newest thing that's out in the market is entitlement management, and that is absolutely going towards roles and responsibilities, because what's important is will the identity get breached? Possibly at some point of time. Passwords getting leaked is a very common phenomena, hence multi-factor authentications and other ways to protect it. Similarly, from a roles and responsibility standpoint, if we are not monitoring and doing the basics that we were actually doing earlier on-prem, if we are not extending that to the cloud, that is the latest challenge which I think now the solution service providers are trying to solve. And being on the other side of the people, I see a entitlement management pitch literally every day. So I think a very valid point. With that,
if I may add.
yes.
So to your point, attacks are going to increase. They are not going to reduce. Because did we ever thought 10 years or 15 years back that somebody will call me and try to take my CV number and OTP and take my money? No. The only form was somebody will go and rob my bank. That was the only form at that point of time. What I feel is, we all have watched superhero movies, right? So there are superheroes and supervillains. I think the role of superhero is the most boring work, because the only thing he does is stop what supervillain has decided. So for our organizations and the attackers, we have to be supervillains. We have to think of creative ideas, what we are going to do to keep them guessing that what are we going to do. And we have to be creative. We have to be innovative. And I believe that if I go 10 years back, IT was an enabler, IT and security was an enabler for, or not an enabler, a support for the business. Now IT is an enabler. Look at the largest banks. They are no longer banks. They are IT companies. We have Kotak here, ICICI. Look at the IT teams they have. So we are now moving from a business first to a technology first environment. And that's where we need all these supports to safeguard our overall environment. So.
Fabulous, thank you. I think it's been a very engaging discussion today. I just wanted to extend a note to DSCI, and a very proud moment with what Anil said about the Indian ecosystem. So I kind of makes you very proud of the growth we are seeing and the ecosystem that's expanding. So a lot more to India, and thanks to DSCI for setting this forum up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Anuj.